In Black baseball history, guys. Hey, welcome to the broadcast tonight. I'm going to be talking about some historic facts that happened on January the 8th. So today's edition is the January 8th, 2026 edition. So I want to thank you for joining. If you've never joined me before, just know that you can subscribe to this broadcast. And if you're picking it up in the rebroadcast, I do encourage you to go ahead and subscribe. We are very close to 500 subscribers, so we want to go ahead and hit that plateau as soon as we can. And so just want to invite you. So hang on. Hey, get something to drink here. So anyway, again, it's Phil Dixon. And without hesitation, we want to go immediately into some historic facts for tonight. Okay, are you ready? Okay, here it comes. January the 8th, 1904. We're going to go way back to the turn of the century of 1900, turn of the 20th century, all right? And so January 8th, 1904, uh, Chester, Pennsylvania pitching great Porter Charleston is born in Mexa, Texas, okay? He broke into big time baseball with Hilldale in 1927. That was the Hilldale Derby Daisies in 1927, and remained with that team for many seasons, although he did appear with some other teams. So he was with their 1931 team in 1931. I got to mention this team because I've written a book about the 1931 Grays being one of baseball's all time teams. Now, the interesting thing is, they really only lost one series that year, and it was to Hilldale. And Hilldale was a powerful team in 1931. Of course, Porter Charleston was part of that team. I'm going to probably elaborate on that a little bit more because I have all of their box scores as well. And of course, it might give me an opportunity to spotlight Martin Diego, who was on that team. And I really have never had a chance to spotlight him the way that I would like to. But certainly, we don't talk about Porter Charleston nearly enough as well. So he was just an outstanding pitcher for them. And of course, after leaving baseball, he did pitch for the Chester Elks, and later on the Conglonium. I guess that's a little some kind of new kind of rubber or whatever. Crescents. Okay, and interesting things about Porter Charleston. In 1948, he was shot by his neighbor, a man by the name of William Johnson, but survived and did not press charges. How about that? Saying it was his own fault. It had something to do with a lady. That's all I remember. And his son, Porter Charleston Jr., was an amateur boxer in the 1940s. So you might find that one. And here's an interesting thing about Porter Charleston. In 1968, Charleston picked an all-star team of players he had played with and against. And this was his all-star team. So get your pencil out if you want to write this down. This is Porter Charleston's all-star team, 1968. Keep in mind, he's naming people that eventually get into the Hall of Fame, but they were not in the Hall of Fame in 1968. As a matter of fact, the only African-American player that was in the Hall of Fame at that particular time was Jackie Robinson. So here we go. Is his catcher? He chose Josh Gibson. And he said that Josh was the most consistent hitter he ever faced. Okay, that's quite a statement coming from a pitcher. Okay, for his first baseman, he selected Buck Leonard. No surprise there. For his second base, yeah, that's just kind of surprised because we wouldn't expect him to be over there, but he wanted to make sure this guy got on the infield, and it was Judd Wilson. So he selected Judd Wilson as a second baseman, who typically was a third baseman, right? He's on the other side of the diamond. And for his shortstop, he selected the great Frank Warfield. Yeah, Frank Warfield died in 1932 in a hotel in Pittsburgh. Quite a story behind that. And many players told me that story. Of course, you can't know what that story is by reading the newspapers. They didn't give you all the details, but I knew many ball players who were playing in the East that I interviewed that gave me a different story, right? And now what's interesting is on third base, he put Chino Smitty Smith, Chino Smith. That's who he put as his third baseman. Kind of interesting how he moved a few players around. In his outfield, he didn't give a specific one like left, right, or center, but he did pick Crush Holloway, and then George Johnson, the old Hilldale outfielder, and then Oscar Charleston. And as his utility player, he used Jake Stevens. out of York, Pennsylvania. So Jake was an outstanding player. I did not interview Jake, but I did interview his brother. And years ago, I went to York, Pennsylvania to speak, and I was there with Leon Day, and we stayed at I think it was the Yorktown Hotel, and that's where Jake Stevens worked for many years after he retired from baseball. Okay, and Charleston picked two pitchers. Didn't pick himself, but he picked a right-hander, and that right-hander was Satchel Paige, and his left-hander was Andy Cooper. And both of those guys have been enshrined in Cooperstown. So he picked a pretty good squad because you figure Buck Leonard's in the Hall of Fame, Judd Wilson's in the Hall of Fame, and Oscar Charleston's in the Hall of Fame, and Jake Stevens is not, but certainly Page and Cooper are. So interesting picks for Porter Charleston, who was born on this day, January the 8th, 1904. All right, we got a few people joining us. If you join, let me know what city you're joining from, okay? Then somebody wants to know about my favorite car. Well, I'm going to stay with baseball tonight, if that's okay, all right? So anyway, let's keep it going. And I certainly appreciate you coming in here. But yeah, I'm going to keep staying with this baseball, right? Okay. Might have to send you over to the NASCAR spot, okay? So anyway, let's keep it rolling. Next fact, January the 8th, 1916. Pete Hill, you probably heard of Pete Hill. I speak of him often. Great outfielder for the Chicago Leland Giants, the Philadelphia Giants before then, and later on the Chicago American Giants. Well, he's almost single-handedly defeated the Federal All-Stars by a 3-1 score at Manual Arts Field in Los Angeles, and this is during a Winter League play. And Hill went 3 for 4 on that day, batting against Charlie Geach, Chech, Cheeks, could be Cheeks, Chech, who had won 12 games for the Venice Tigers that year out in the Pacific Coast League. Hill hit a home run over the right fielder's head in the fourth inning to give his team their first run. And then in the seventh, he doubled the left center and drove in 2 more runs, making him responsible for 3 of his team's 4 runs. And they won, of course, 3-1. I'm saying, it was 3-1. So actually, he was responsible for all the runs, right? So that was Pete Hill. Pete Hill is now enshrined in Cooperstown. But let me tell you this: Pete Hill is not being recognized the way that he should. In my estimation, Pete Hill is probably the first baseball player to record over 4,000 hits. And I think this guy was every bit as good a hitter as Ty Cobb. And I think that he had more power than Ty Cobb. And I think he hit certainly with the same consistency and average, but I think he had a lot more hits. And I believe that Pete Hill got to 4,000 hits before Cobb. Now, what's interesting is, once again, if you go online and you look at Seam Heads and Baseball Reference and all those, they're only listing games that he played against other African-American teams. Well, I list all the games, and I've been looking at Pete Hill. His multi-hit games are just incredible. This guy was a true superstar that we should have learned more about him way back. And the time, it's not too late. Unfortunately, we don't have as many pictures as I wish we had on Pete Hill, but you never know what can surface in the future. But Pete Hill is simply an outstanding player. And if you don't know much about Pete Hill, go look him up. I'm just telling you, in my estimation, he was one of the first real superstars in the Negro Baseball Leagues as a position player. Okay? So that was Pete Hill, and you can see what he did today on this day, January 8th, 1916, all right? And he's not facing a bunch of guys with no records, people who don't have distinction as pitchers. He could do this against everybody, so it made no difference who he's playing against, right? All right, then. So let's go to this one. January the 8th, 1921. George Herman Lawson, president of the recently incorporated Continental League, said in New York that he is strongly considering the installation of Negro or Cuban clubs in his new league. He pointed out that the Negro populations of Boston and Philadelphia, where he was planning on putting teams, form a large percentage of the city's population, and that there are at least 100 Negro baseball players in the country who equal the playing skill of the best of the major leaguers, meaning the National American League. Now, uh, Herman Lawson was a white guy. Now, this is not his first attempt. Around 1910, he was trying to start a league there. And at that league, it was going to be a white league, but he was going to bring in African American players in that league. And one of his players that he was going to bring into that league, and the first person he signed for that new league was a guy by the name of Billy Thompson. William Thompson, and he was out of Concord, New Hampshire, and he was a great player. Now, if you go to Wikipedia, they do have a listing for him. For if you put in Billy Thompson, it'll pop up. But it has a lot of bad information in there. Yeah, he did play for the Cuban Giants, but he also played for the Philadelphia Giants in 1905. And if you look at my book, the Great Team Series, the 1905 Philadelphia Giants, you will see him listed there, and that was Billy Thompson. And he was playing catcher. And when you look at the reference in Wikipedia, there's no reference to him playing catcher. But yeah, he was an outstanding player, and he was the first person that Lawson signed for his new league that he was starting then. And I'm trying to see if I put any name. Then it was called. He was starting in 1910 the United States Baseball League. Lawson was a big dreamer. I write about him specifically in my book, A Harvest on Freedom's Field. The Andrew Root Foster Harvest on Freedom's Field. If you can get that book, I write in detail about Lawson and who he was and how much money he had. I really go into detail on Lawson, but most people don't know who Lawson is. But and he wasn't born in the United States, but he was bent on making sure that he was able to get some of these African American players into his league. And every time he tried to organize a league, uh, he tried to get them in. And so he was not successful, but he becomes a footnote in history. But he was certainly somebody that you want to recognize. So, hey, if you're still with me, go ahead and let me know where you're watching from. All right. I appreciate that very much. All right. Okay. Let's go to January 8th, 1926. Okay. So, commissioners of the Eastern Colored League. Now, remember, they had two leagues at that time. They had the Negro National League, which are Western teams, and have the Eastern Colored League. So this is the Eastern Colored League, teams in the East. Okay, they met in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, and 7 teams were represented, and they voted on who was going to lead the league that year. And so Ed Bowden of Hilldale was named chairman, and Charles P. Spedden of the Baltimore Black Sox, he was a railroad guy, he was named secretary, and James J. Keenan of the New York Lincoln Giants was elected treasurer. And so that is the formation of the officials for the 1926 Eastern Colored League. So people are organizing this time of year, and this is the kind of information that we usually find when you're out here looking for baseball information in this point of the season. So somebody said, thanks for sharing. Your insight is always, okay. Your insight is always, I guess it's always on point. How about that? I didn't see what you had. And so you're from DC. Oh man, that's a great baseball town as well. Um, Been there many times. And of course, they talk about the Homestead Grays who had a lease there and played there in the 1940s. But even before then, there was a team called the Washington Giants that were a really powerful team around 1910. Recently, a lot of their photographs of the owners photographs came up for auction. So I was able to help identify some of those photographs. So the Washington Giants. So that's a powerful name, and it takes place throughout history. And most people don't know that all these teams existed. Okay. All right. Somebody says always on point. Certainly appreciate that, and thank you for joining. And once again, if you're coming in here, just let me know. I've got just a couple of more that I'm going to go over. Actually, I just got one more. Okay, and this one is January the 8th. 1935, the Chicago Crusaders, aka the Savoy Big Room 5, aka the Chicago Giants basketball team, which featured John Yancey, which is Bill Yancey's brother, Jamil Yancey was a Negro League player, and the outstanding Jack Bethard, Bethards, and he was the original clown prince of basketball. Later on, you see Middlelark Lemon having that name, and Goose Tatum having that name. But there was always somebody first, and the first person was this guy named Jack Bethard, Bethards, was the original crown prince of basketball. When I think about that, I'm always thinking about how some of these nicknames belong to other people, and then someone else would get that nickname later on, and well, the rest is history. We don't remember the original guy. So, but anyway, also they had Zach Clayton on the team, and I've talked about Zach. He was the referee in the Thriller of Manila with George Foreman and Muhammad Ali. Of course, he was a basketball star and also a baseball player as well. So he's playing basketball with this particular night, and he let's see, he was with the team that captured a 42-40 win in North Adams, Massachusetts. And Clayton, he was there. He scored 10 of his team's points that night. And of course, Clayton, in case you've never heard of Zach Clayton, you might want to look him up. There's some photographs of him. He is a member of the Naismith Basketball Hall of Fame in Springfield, Massachusetts. So tonight we've been able to talk about a few Hall of Famers. So we talked about Pete Hill. We got Porter Charleston's All-Star team. Let's see. And we got Herman Lawson talking about his guy that he wanted, who signed up first, Billy Thompson, of course, the Eastern Colored League. None of those guys. And to be honest with you, I know uh, the owners that are in the Cooperstown Hall of Fame from the East are, for instance, I know Effa Manley and then Cumberland Posey. I'm trying to think if there's anybody. Oh, okay. Yeah. What's his name? Alex Pompez of the Cubans. Those are the Eastern owners that I can think of that are in the Hall of Fame. Now, I can tell you, nobody there, except maybe Cumberland Posey, did more than Ed Bolden. Ed Bolden was certainly a powerful man, and he should have been selected, in my opinion, ahead of Effa Manley. Ed Bolden goes back to the early 20s, and he was there longer and he was there stronger. He really made a difference in the Eastern Color League, and then later on, what they call the Negro National League East. Yeah, somebody says happy birthday to Porter Charleston. Yep. And somebody said my dad's high school diploma was signed by Cumberland Posey. All right, you must have been in Pittsburgh. So he was a principal. I didn't know he was a principal. I know that I think he was on the school board, if I'm correct. So check that out. Check that out. And let's see. I guess that's about it for tonight. You see, I try to get in here about 20 minutes. You guys have any questions? I got time for one question. If you have a question, if you can type it in quickly, and I'll see if I can answer it. But yeah, make sure you subscribe, man. I'm getting so close to 500. I think we're probably going to crack that this weekend if everything goes well. So I just keep them close. So tonight I'm celebrating. I didn't have any Monarch questions on here, but I do have my Monarchs jersey on. You can probably see it here. So I'm always trying to wear a jersey, a hat, or something like that. And if you like this kind of broadcast, go ahead and go back and look at some of my old broadcasts, especially some of my shorts. They're real, like a minute or something like that. You can go. So anybody have any questions? Well, I guess not. Maybe we don't have any questions. Oh, wait a minute, here comes one. Do I have any insight on the Pittsburgh Industrial League? I don't have a great insight, however, I know the Homestead Grays played all of those teams that were in those industrial leagues. Josh Gibson, uh, yeah, he was playing around Pittsburgh. Interesting thing about Josh Gibson, I might as well tell you this story. You ever heard of a guy named Buck Ewing? Well, Buck Ewing is kind of responsible for Josh Gibson coming to the Grays. And here's the quick story. 1930, the Kansas City Monarchs are pioneering night baseball, and they're playing a game in Pittsburgh's Forbes Field. This is before Greenlee Field was built. And so it's night baseball, and they are using lights that are very primitive. And so you probably have better lights in in your living room than what they had. But they're playing anyway. Buck Ewing was the catcher, and he split his finger, and so he was not able to play the game. And he's a great catcher out of Schenectady, New York. So anyway, they needed a replacement. Um, Vic Harris was their backup catcher, and he said, "No way am I going behind that plate." And then somebody said, "Hey, there's a kid around town here, and he's a pretty good catcher, and I think we ought to give him a try." And so I can't remember. I've seen different references, and I've heard different references because I talked to Vic Harris's brother. Now, Vic Harris's brother told me that they went and got Josh, and he wasn't at the park. Now, I've seen some people with some references saying Josh was at the park. But yeah, Vic Harris's brother told me they went and got him. So when they went and got Josh, they took Buck Ewing's uniform off of him and put it on Josh Gibson. Josh Gibson went behind the plate, caught the game. And how about this? The next year, Buck Ewing was back in Schenectady. And I had the pleasure of visiting his grave in Schenectady. We had to clean it off and everything. And this was this past year, back in March. And so, but he lost his job to the great Josh Gibson, who becomes the next great thing in the Negro Baseball Leagues for the next 10, 15 years. And that was Josh Gibson. And so Buck Ewing, split finger, gave Josh Gibson his opportunity to break into the Negro Leagues. I guess you didn't know that story. It's a good story. And I was able to hear that story from people who were actually there. And I just feel so proud that I was able to get those interviews. So that does it for me tonight. You said I try to get out here in 20 minutes. I'm at 21 minutes now. It'll probably be 22 by the time I completely sign off. But guys, remember to subscribe and remember to come back for more. All right. And they say, I hear Harold Tinker. Yep, Harold Tinker. Yep. He became a priest. Yeah, but he was a great ball player in that area. There was a lot of good ball players in Pittsburgh. Actually, in any city that you go to, if there was a black population, there was a lot of baseball being played. So Pittsburgh was a strong town. Same thing could be said of New York. Same thing could be said of Chicago. It just goes on and on and on. But there were a lot of good players who never came to the Negro Leagues for whatever reason. And then if you go down in Texas, all over Texas, some of the greatest baseball you ever want to see was played in Texas. So anyway, guys, I will touch on this, as we go along, and I'll hit on all these specific and interesting topics along the way, and I'll just throw them at you. And we'll learn some things that maybe I've learned that you don't hear very often in conversation. All right, so thank you very much, and have a nice, get ready for the weekend. I think I'll come back tomorrow. We'll do a broadcast, and I'm excited. The weekend's coming up, and this is still the hot stove league season, and I've been watching the baseball channel, hoping that I've been watching old replays. I was watching the Seattle Mariners tonight, and I was watching a player get a hit. Jay Bruner. Man, I forgot all about Jay Bruner. You remember Jay Bruner? So if you're a baseball fan, you know some of these names. But anyway, thank you guys for joining me, and stay with me, and come back from time to time. So hit that subscribe button and catch me live or catch one of my replays of the broadcast. All right. Have a nice evening. And this is Phil Dixon with This Day in Black Baseball History. This is the January 8th, 2026 edition of this series. Have a nice day.